Just from the founding, America's greatest virtue has been its citizenry. That's why we get so mad. We love this country and we cherish our citizenship. About 7% of all births in the US and more than births in any state besides Texas or California were to illegal immigrants. Can you believe that number?
Who have been wreaking havoc on American communities. And shame on you and shame on the mainstream media for trying to cover for these individuals. This is a vicious gang, Andrew, that has taken the lives of American women.
In the Supreme Court of the United States, we've got 20 states saying we are in agreement with President Trump and the American people. Birthright citizenship is not the law of the land, and it needs to be interpreted that Trump's executive order is valid. We want the Supreme Court to come set a nice rule for the entire country that trickles down to all of the other circuits and clears this up once and for all. The 14th Amendment and the subject to the jurisdiction thereof clause does not give illegal aliens who entered the country and violated our sovereign law from a foreign nation, meaning that they're not subject to our laws or to our jurisdiction because they're breaking our jurisdiction. They do not get to have children who are automatic citizens. Here is what 20 states are saying in support of President Trump. The brief of Iowa and 19 other states coming in as friends of the court to support President Trump in the Supreme Court of the United States of America. They write, all right, listen, the Attorney General of Iowa and on behalf of 19 other states is now here in the Supreme Court saying New Jersey and Washington have the same standing under the law as Texas. And remember, many of these states are suing Trump. So he was originally sued by CASA, which is I think, nonprofit, also sued by Washington. Trump was also sued by New Jersey. So these are the states responding as amicus, friends of the court. They say, we've got standing just like they have standing. And so if you're going to say that they have standing, then you should apply it to us. Courts have before rejected states seeking nationwide injunctive relief in immigration cases, right? So why should this one order that came down in New Jersey or came down in Washington, why should one judge be able to issue a nationwide blanket injunction? And in this case, plaintiffs like CASA, they have even worse claims to nationwide injunctions. If this court is going to reconsider this, then this is not the right place to do this. This court, right, the states, should consider the balance of the equities here when you're deciding what is happening. What injury in fact is suffered in Washington state from the executive order, which bans birthright citizenship, being allowed to go into effect while this case is being litigated? It's in Iowa. So what's the harm to Washington if we can litigate this in Iowa and there is not a stay on birthright citizenship? Okay, nationwide scope for this should be more limited. Indeed, Supreme Court, say the states, even outside the state-specific context, many members of this court have expressed discomfort with the effects of an improperly granted nationwide relief. The U.S. comes to the Supreme Court in this emergency posture due to a crisis caused by nationwide injunctions entered without reasonable bases. Talking to you, John Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett. Here, despite tens of states opposing the injunctive relief that was sought below, nationwide relief is enjoined. We're enforced. Ultimately, writes the states, one consideration in granting Trump's modest request for a partial stay is irreparable harm, okay? Now, the states contend, the other states, the blue states, contend that irreparable harm exists, but the red states don't see any harm at all. What harm? Now, beyond that, the blue states can't show that they're going to win on the merits anyways. This case is not about whether birthright citizenship is guaranteed under our Constitution. It is. But instead, the proper framing of this case asks where the limits of birthright citizenship end. Everyone agrees that a child born to American parents in the United States is a U.S. citizen at birth. Everyone agrees that a child born to Canadian parents in Canada is not, okay? But the challenged executive order asserts that some children, like a children born to non-citizen parents who are illegally in the United States, are not automatically under the Constitution citizens. And nothing in the Supreme Court case, writing this to the Supreme Court in Wong Kim Ark, that you guys, the Supreme Court, decided back in the 1800s, nothing mandates that a child be automatically bestowed citizenship if they are, okay? And in the Wong Kim Ark case, remember, these were Chinese immigrants who had lawful permanent residency in the United States, and they had a baby. They were in the country legally. And both history and this court's jurisprudence reflect that reality. Now, instead, Trump's executive order accepts birthright citizenship as the default and just asks to whom the citizenship attaches. Indeed, all parties agree that under an original understanding of both the Constitution and the 14th, birthright citizenship does not need to extend to every child born on American soil. The executive order from Trump exactly reflects that text, that history, and that tradition. Constitution, which is it does not guarantee birthright to illegal aliens. Just from the founding, America's greatest virtue has been its citizenry. That's why we get so mad. We love this country and we cherish our citizenship and our Bill of Rights and our codification of our natural rights. And so when our elected leaders crap in our country by opening up our borders and diluting and ransacking the common nation that we're all trying to build here, it's very offensive to all of us. A citizenry united both by ideas and common cause. The Constitution never required every person who happened to be born on the United States soil to be a citizen. Our founders weren't morons. Nor is that the original meaning of the 14th Amendment, or subject to the jurisdiction thereof. In fact, Alexander Hamilton even recognized the United States was poised to answer this question: whether societies of men are really capable or not of establishing good government from reflection and choice, or whether they are forever destined to depend on their political constitutions on accident and force. Federalist number 1 from Hamilton. Now, accident and force is an apt way to describe birth tourism. It's not an accident. A lot of it's intentional. Schemes to have children in the United States costing enormous sums of money by tourists with no allegiance to the United States at all, or to describe aspects of the invading flood of people across our border, coordinated at least by vicious cartels to hide their human drug trafficking efforts. Now, for the past 4 years, disastrous immigration policies transformed every state in our country into a border state, whether you like it or not. Flooded every state. Even New York City is a border state now, right? Including criminals convicted of crimes in their home country, violent gangbangers that the ACLU loves, and suspected Islamic State terrorists flooding around our country, thanks to Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer. Illegal immigration imposes significant costs on the states and their people, and creating incentives for illegal immigration poses and puts lives at risk. Allowing anyone born on American soil to claim American citizenship creates incentives for illegal immigration, and it exacerbates the state's costs. Now, the 14th Amendment Citizenship Clause says all persons born or naturalized and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. On his first day in office, Trump issued an executive order. It instructed federal officials, do not give citizenship documents and do not accept documents from state or other governments who say that these people are citizens, unless they came from lawful permanent residents, just like in the Supreme Court case called Wong Kim Ark. Now, removing this incentive is critical. It's going to reduce illegal immigration. We spend a lot of time and money on births by illegal aliens, and the states have had enough. They say, first of all, President Trump's executive order complies with the 14th Amendment. In fact, the Constitution has long required extending citizenship to be subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And that means a lot more than just merely born in the United States, like it's just geography. You just happen to plop a baby out in this physical land, and that's good enough. Such a meaning would not only be superfluous if we don't give it more meaning than that, but it ignores the history around that phrase. In fact, there are categories of individuals who are exempt from birthright citizenship, says the states, and categories that were exempt without further congressional action. So the question for the Supreme Court now is whether the Constitution requires that lawbreakers and sojourners that enter this country illegally or lie to immigration officials are guaranteed to have U.S. citizen children. I mean, a tremendous gift. As long as you can get into the house, you can eat anything in the refrigerator. As long as you can get in, then you're good. And your kids too, they're good too. Says this court, in accord with the Supreme Court precedents, says the answer should be no. That's not how this works. In fact, birthright citizenship, they tell the Supreme Court, 20 states, for people who enter the country illegally creates perverse incentives. And in fact, it costs the states huge sums of money. The number of births to illegal immigrants and the cost of those alone is enormous, as is the value of U.S. citizenship. It's a ton of money. In fact, such as enticing reward compels people to try to come in here and creates a flood of bad actors trying to manipulate our borders for their nefarious ends. And so here's the story. Supreme Court, Trump's order is lawful. Now, these other blue states, they claim that their interpretation of the citizenship clause is a bright line and nearly universal rule. They say everybody is continuously and unanimously approved. They say it's birthright for everybody except like diplomats. Like, that's it. Diplomats are just like a technicality, so it doesn't apply. That's wrong. Now, despite their assertion that we're trying to overturn 150 years of consensus, it's not true at all. In fact, Trump's executive order is in alignment with the original meaning of the 14th Amendment. They're wrong about their interpretation. They say, oh no, it's birthrights everywhere. It's universal and it's unanimous and so on. But last month in a criminal case, a federal judge in the Eastern District of Virginia in January said, well, you know, it is a very unsettled term, subject to the jurisdiction. What does that even mean? He wrote, in his opinion, in Virginia, a federal judge said, I don't really know what it means. Says, it's a hotly contested question. They say, of course it is. Indeed, many scholars who've studied the 14th Amendment have reached the same interpretation. After reviewing the text in the 14th and other things, one other scholar said, non-immigrant and illegal aliens, however, are not similarly considered part of the American people. They are not subject to the complete jurisdiction of the United States, and therefore they're not entitled to birthright citizenship. Law Review article from Texas. Now, another scholar reached a similar conclusion. This guy called Richard Epstein, not that one, says another scholar reached a similar conclusion. So this has come up a lot. And as illegality is, if anything, a more serious offense, there's no reason to think that breaking the law would then suddenly construe citizenship to your progeny. Ridiculous. A third scholar also wrote about it. He said, Supreme Court, check this out. You're going to like this one. Washburn, Law Review Journal, says, if one follows the intent of the 1866 Civil Rights Act, there is strong constitutional argument that children of illegal immigrants be excluded because the parents have not personally subjected themselves to the jurisdiction of the United States because they broke the law and have not acquired the requisite temporary or local allegiance by complying with the immigration laws. They're literally flouting the laws. Therefore, they've not maintained a lawful residence or a domicile. So kids, not citizens. Nor are those the only authorities on this either. According to Judge Richard Posner of the Seventh Circuit, he wrote this: the citizenship clause that these other people advanced in this case from 2003 makes no sense. He also doubted that a constitutional amendment was necessary to prevent birth automatically in this country from conferring citizenship. You don't need an amendment for that. It says it right there. It said we should not be encouraging foreigners to come to the U.S. solely to enable them to give citizenship to their kids. But that's what they want. That's what the left wants, because these people, they want to vote for them. Now, the 14th Amendment and its original interpretation is shown from the beginning. It says, start with the citizenship clause's full text. It says very clearly, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state in which they reside. Thus, to become a citizen, you got to be subject to the jurisdiction thereof. It has meaning. Now, the blue states think that it means that you just must comply with U.S. law. Now, even if that's true, like they're not complying with U.S. law, but then they carve out like this asylum thing. They're like, are you in danger? Do you fear for your life in your home country? They're like, oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm under attack from Maduro or something. Okay, great. Come on in here. Plaintiffs say that the only individuals excluded are those who are not in fact subject to the United States at birth, which are diplomats, right? They're not complying with U.S. law. But plaintiffs and their interpretation brings two problems. First, when the 14th Amendment was passed, the legal fiction of extraterritoriality meant that diplomats were not an inhabitant of the country to which he is accredited, but of the country of his origin, where the parents came from. Okay, kid gets connected to the parent. Thus, the children of foreign diplomats were not born in the United States. They were born to that diplomat, and they were not subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Then we have the Native Americans. They're both born in the U.S. and must comply with U.S. law. But under the citizenship clause interpretation, Native Americans should have American citizenship at birth under the 14th Amendment. But as they even admit, these blue states, the original understanding for purposes of the 14th Amendment was that children born to Native Americans are not subject to the United States. In other words, the 14th was for the slaves and was for the Civil War, not for Native Americans. Now, accordingly, ensuring that Native Americans were citizens required a separate statute later, 8 U.S. Code 1401B, and was not part of the 14th Amendment. Even though they're born physically within the borders of the United States, for that period of time, they were not citizens. Because the citizenship clause of the 14th does not apply to Native Americans, their interpretation cannot be correct, right? So it's not as broad as only applying to diplomats. It excluded the Native Americans. They had allegiances to their native tribe and their homeland. Adopting plaintiffs' interpretation, then if we say, well, the 14th Amendment just means if we could punish you, then that means you're subject to our jurisdiction, which is not how it was interpreted at all. It's a perversion for their own benefit. Another important case to understand, which the founders would have viewed and used, is the Calvin's case. Talks about allegiance. A child born to an invading army is not a natural born subject. You get invaded and then they drop a baby here, like, well, I guess you're one of us now. What? To use Lord Coke's phrasing, the child is not under the allegiance of a subject, nor under the protection of the king. And going all the way back to the English. This is ridiculous. We're not even taking those kids either. Now, the Supreme Court's interpretation supports our claim. The earliest discussion of the citizenship clause excluded children born to individuals who were not lawfully and permanently in the United States. In fact, just 6 years after ratification, the court explained that the phrase subject to its jurisdiction was intended to exclude from its operation children of ministers, consuls, citizens, or subjects of foreign states, and more, the slaughterhouse cases. Now, though dicta, the opinion and interpretation excludes birthright citizenship when neither parent is a lawful permanent resident. So, the Supreme Court continued. Then they had a decision examining Native Native Americans. Elk versus Wilkins. According to the Supreme Court, the evident meaning of the subject to the jurisdiction thereof phrase was not merely subject in some respects, but complete, complete, direct and immediate allegiance. And if you're an illegal, that means you have come to the country and subjected yourselves to our laws, not openly violated them. The executive order follows the path charted by Elk. Trump's. It does not recognize citizenship if neither parent is lawful or a permanent resident, lawful and permanent, because at the time of their child's birth, illegal aliens and birth tourists are members of an independent political community and owe allegiance to their home countries. And under Supreme Court precedent in Elk, it doesn't confer citizenship. So they say this, listen, consider this hypothetical, Supreme Court. Just play this game in your mind. Consider a not too distant hypothetical in which America's enemies landed from a submarine in the hours of darkness and upon landing buried their uniforms and then proceeded in civilian dress to New York City. Now imagine if one had brought a pregnant wife along for the journey and gave birth on American soil. While all parties agree about enemy combatants, this type of infiltration is categorically different. Granting citizenship to such a plainclothes saboteur's child stresses subject to the jurisdiction beyond the breaking point. Those illegal entrants to our country cannot have been guaranteed birthright citizenship, and such an interpretation of the 14th Amendment is absurd. And this is not an absurd hypothetical. It's happening every day. They're just not coming over in submarines. Similar strong arguments support the concept that birthright citizenship does not follow from an invading force. Blackmun talked about it. Said, in this case, here now, Trump has explicitly declared an invasion, and the blue states are high on other Supreme Court precedents. They say that the Wong Kim Ark case confirmed that the 14th Amendment guarantees citizenship to the children of immigrants born in the United States. Yeah, but they emphasize multiple times, mom and dad back then from China were lawful permanent residents. They were not going back to China. Even its holding stressed the importance of lawful residents. So as long as they are permitted to reside here, Wong Kim says they're good. You're allowed to be here. You've subjected yourself to the jurisdiction. Your kid is here. Now, Wong Kim did not address children born to illegals or birth tourists because the parents in that case were lawful, other than to note that their citizenship is an open question. So for the people on the left to pervert Wong Kim Ark, that Supreme Court case, and say it settles this is ridiculous, obviously. Another useful contrast can be found where the Supreme Court recognized that a minor daughter living in the U.S. for 9 years did not automatically become a citizen when her dad was naturalized because she was in the country illegally. The court cautioned that naturalization of parents affects minor children only if dwelling in the United States. Like they got to be here. Just because she's overseas or something doesn't mean she's automatically a citizen with dad. Despite living in the United States for close to a decade, for purposes of jurisdiction, she was at the boundary line and had gained no foothold in the United States. And that holds true today. But just living, right? Also, the Supreme Court's earliest decisions established that the citizenship clause did not confer citizenship to children born to individuals who were not lawfully and permanently in the country. Wong Kim, that case, not any different. And so accordingly, this court should find that Trump's executive order is consistent within the meaning of the 14th Amendment, and these blue states are not going to win. You can go all the way back. In fact, back during the 14th Amendment's creation, even Cooley said, a citizen by birth must not only be born here, but he also must be subject to the jurisdiction thereof. That means mom and dad too. The approach was also reflected in contemporaneous practice. History lesson. In 1873, Attorney General under Grant interpreted jurisdiction, explained that jurisdiction must be understood to mean absolute or complete jurisdiction. Aliens, among whom are persons born here and naturalized abroad, might only be subject in a limited extent. Political and military rights do not pertain to them. So if you have any allegiances to any other home country and you're not subjecting yourself here, it's not enough. Another example from another 17th, 18th century case. And so we cannot ignore this. There's been a misunderstanding that they are trying to pervert upon us, and we can't allow that to happen, Supreme Court. So the states continue. They say, all right, Supreme Court, look, besides being just wrong, the blue states, their citizenship clause interpretation will continue to attract illegal immigration and birth tourism. If we allow people to just come here and plop babies out, there's going to be a lot more. In fact, this guy, James Wilson, recognized this while drafting the 14th Amendment. He said, this is not to establish any new rights, but we're going to protect and enforce those which belong to every citizen. The costs surrounding these foreign births impact the states in several ways, and Trump's order is going to reduce this. The lure of American citizenship motivates pregnant women to travel here to give birth. Happens all the time. Birth tourism. Pregnant illegal aliens admit their belief that American citizenship would guarantee that their child has health care and other vital benefits. I thought they had socialized medicine over there. Why do they need to come here for our care? Some women desperate to give birth in the U.S. cross the border the day they deliver their baby. One border hospital administrator witnessed this, said, mothers about to give birth that walk up to the hospital genitals still wet from swimming across the river in actual labor are dirty, wet, and cold. Some women give birth at the border just minutes after crossing. Attracting this imposes significant costs on the states. For example, between 225,000 and 250,000 U.S. births in 2023, about 7% of all births in the U.S. and more than births in any state besides Texas or California were to illegal immigrants. Can you believe that number, right? This is where you hear the great replacement theory and all these things. All citizens under the current interpretation, U.S. citizens. So you get to break and enter, and then you get to just clean out the whole fridge and just drop whatever you want in the country. It's amazing. In Texas and Georgia, 3/4 of births to illegal immigrants were likely paid for by taxpayers, and we're paying for it too. In total, the states pay an estimated almost $1 billion, $938 million in Medicaid costs for illegal babies. States bear many costs associated with births, according to illegal aliens as well. Texas estimates that its perinatal coverage for illegals is $30 to $38 million that could go to your kids and their schools and your roads and your safe streets, but they don't. They go to illegal invaders' babies. Isn't that fun? We'll see what the Supreme Court does. And because the mother and any other family members accompanying the new baby often stay, the states end up paying for their health care as well. Texas says its people pay as much as $700 million, almost $1 billion a year, for illegal aliens and their babies, and $90 million for Medicaid. Over the course of their lives, each illegal immigrant in this country is a lifetime cost of 68 G's. Nice. Testimony of this other person. And that does not include the cost of every extra crime committed, not to mention the crime that they committed when they came in the first place, by an illegal immigrant. Some of those crimes have elicited national outrage and bipartisan response. Some of those responses have been muted, like by Judge Boasberg, who loves Tren de Aragua and the ACLU gangbanger lawyers who are representing them for probably free. The total cost to the states is enormous. When healthcare costs, public education costs, welfare costs, other state programs, and more, all estimated add up to $115 billion each year because of illegal immigration, which is, it's not for us. It's our country, and it's not for us at all. Because plaintiffs and their citizen clause interpretation increases illegal immigration, it increases the costs of this. They say babies born in America to illegal aliens also impose costs on the state throughout their lives. These babies likely would have to be born in a different country, would have been, but now they're here. But as American citizens, these children may, for example, participate in welfare programs, get state health care, get a driver's license. The state will incur costs for all of these things. And they're also incorrect in their interpretation because it encourages birth tourism. This is when rich, pregnant moms travel to the United States and drop their babies in our country. Birth tourism is booming, by the way. Some estimate that 20 to 26,000 foreign babies are dropped off here in our land. Some people paying up to 100 G's to do so. China and Russia sending most of them. Criminal activity has accompanied birth tourism as well. Federal prosecutors recently got conspiracy and money laundering convictions against 2 California residents who were thinking about doing this. Has harmed the states, Medicare bills, states had to pay outstanding medical bills, and more. Babies that return to the United States as citizens may create costs and other things. And so the states have been and will continue to be harmed by the citizenship clause interpretation that these blue states are promulgating. They're not going to win this. The 14th Amendment says what it says. And so Supreme Court, you guys should do something about this. Recognize the improper scope of this injunction. Okay, if New Jersey or Washington wants to limit birthright citizenship or prohibit the limitation of birthright citizenship, let them do it in their states. But the red states and the rest of the country wants to do it. So let us get control of our country once again. Now, meanwhile, we've got deportations continuing. Afueras are happening at rapid speeds. 17 extremely dangerous criminals linked to Tren de Aragua have now been afuera to El Salvador. Here's what their president, Nayib Bukele, said. Last night, in a joint military operation with our allies from the United States, we transferred 17 extremely dangerous criminals linked to Tren de Aragua and MS-13. All individuals are confirmed to be very bad people, including those hurting kids. This operation is another step in the fight against terrorism and organized crime. And you can see we've got a little montage video here of those folks being taken out of America and dropped right into that prison called SCOTUS, from which it appears they will never emerge. So the progress continues in spite of these judges and in spite of the efforts by the left to have the deportations continue to occur. We also see we're hitting the drug cartels from the financial angle. Secretary of Treasury Scott Bessent had the following to say, says, national security is economic security. Today, the U.S. Treasury Department loudly leveled new sanctions against financiers of the criminal Sinaloa drug cartel, which has flooded our borders with fentanyl and senselessly murdered innocent American citizens. This ends under President Trump's leadership. Here's Scott Bessent.
As President Trump and I have stressed many times before, economic security is national security. One of the most important important roles we play at Treasury is safeguarding American interests against foreign adversaries. Today, I'm proud to announce that we've taken decisive action against the Sinaloa cartel, one of the most notoriously violent criminal and drug trafficking organizations in the world. Our administration is committed to cutting off their funding and neutralizing the threat through all available tools. We leveled sanctions against 6 individuals and 7 entities involved in a money laundering operation, cutting off financing for these evil people. Today, the Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network also issued an alert to help financial institutions detect and deter bulk cash smuggling by transnational criminal organizations in Mexico. The Sinaloa cartel has invaded our southern border. They have tortured and murdered countless of our citizens, dedicated law enforcement agents like Kiki Camarena, and veterans like Nicholas Quetz, who was only 31 years old when he was ruthlessly taken from us. And the group is responsible for a significant amount of the fentanyl and illicit drugs brought into the United States. Drugs that continue to kill innocent Americans and destroy families every single day. Today's action builds on the great and coordinated work across the Trump administration, from the White House to DHS to the DOJ. We have a steady drumbeat of regulatory and sanctions actions, as well as national security actions, sending a clear message that American strength is back.
All right, Scott Bessent in the House delivering a message. American strength is back. So all stops are pulled out and the battle against the drug cartels continue as America regains her place on this continent. Now here is Caroline Leavitt, who got asked about these Tren de Aragua judges today outside the White House.
Any exemptions for farmers being considered for these tariffs?
No exemptions at this time.
The validation guide that DHS is using to determine who is enemy alien, a Tren de Aragua member, deportable under the Enemy Aliens Act, it has criteria here that require 8 points to be classified as a TDA member. You can get classified by simply having certain symbols in your tattoos and wearing certain streetwear brands. That alone is enough to get someone classified as TDA and sent to El Salvador.
That's not true, actually, Andrew.
According to this document, it is.
No, according to the Department of Homeland Security and the agents, have you talked to the agents who have been putting their lives on the line to detain these foreign terrorists who have been terrorizing our communities? TDA is a vicious gang that has taken the lives of American women, and our agents on the front lines deporting these people with the utmost seriousness, and there is a litany of criteria that they use to ensure that these individuals qualify as foreign terrorists and to ensure that they qualify for deportation. And the president made it incredibly clear to the American public that there would be a mass deportation campaign of not just foreign terrorists, but also illegal criminal aliens who have been wreaking havoc on American communities. And shame on you and shame on the mainstream media for trying to cover for these individuals. This is a vicious gang, Andrew, that has taken the lives of American women.
The government filed in court, which says all.
And you said yourself there are 8 criteria on that document.
They need 8 points.
And you are questioning the credibility of these agents who are putting their life on the line to protect your life and the life of everybody in this group and everybody across the country. And their credibility should be questioned. They finally have a president who is allowing them to do their jobs, and God bless them for doing it.
Yeah! Caroline Leavitt letting that reporter have it. You should be ashamed of yourself, sir. How dare you defend Tren de Aragua? We're trying to save women in America, and the ACLU gangbang lawyers in the blue states just want more of it happening in their own country. It's really bizarre ideology. Don't they want safer streets? Why do they want more gangbangers in our country? Don't turn around and lecture us about due process either, liberals. Don't want to hear about like, oh, I thought the Constitution, this, that, and the other. No, no, no. You gave and you want more due process for Tren de Aragua gangbangers than you did for J6ers, parents who showed up to school board meetings, or the pro-lifers. So don't turn around and lecture us. We saw what you did these last 4 years. So Caroline Leavitt telling them, you should be ashamed of yourselves. We know what you're here for. Stop doing it. We're going to keep our eye on this case, waiting for SCOTUS to give us some answers. Thanks for subscribing and joining as we do.